Hi,
Oh,
everybody. Welcome to Save World Make Art. I'm Eugene Clark, and I am with the illustrious, the magnificent, the fantastical Matt Faulkner.
hello, Professor. How are you? Today you're the professor of SWAT,
Oh,
because
yes.
not police, but you know, baseball.
Ooh, I like it. I like how you tied that in. And,
Yeah, yeah,
if we're talking about swatting a good ball with the bat or with the glove, right?
yeah, yeah. So,
Well,
uh, so we're talking baseball.
we're talking baseball. I know that in the years that you and I have become friends and art companions, if we may, um, I have learned, because of the team that you do root for and are still rooting for, the Boston Red Sox. I've learned that you are a diehard Red Sox fan. In fact, there's many times where we would meet up and you would be wearing your, there it is. I didn't even have to say it. There it, it was just within an arm's reach, like
Yeah.
right there. So that tells me that this is a good topic to bring up, because right now it's the heat of summer, and I am fully absorbed in the baseball mode for many reasons, which I'll share. But when I say baseball to you as an artist and illustrator, um, what pops into your head?
This is a good thing. But before that, I want to just acknowledge too. One of the things that comes to mind is that everybody has their team, right?
Yeah.
What's your team, Eugene?
Well, I grew up in Detroit proper, as we've discussed in earlier podcasts. So my team is the Detroit Tigers.
Mm-hmm. Orange and blue, orange and blue. So that's one of the things for me too. And by the way, I wouldn't necessarily say, so the question is, how did it affect me, I guess, as an artist, baseball? I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a fan. Where I come from, and I wouldn't say it's probably that different for anybody else, but it's like a chip they put in the back of your brain at birth. You must, yeah, be a Red Sox um, person. You got to be. You're part of Red Sox Nation, or you're in big trouble. So yeah, and has been a lot of suffering. So one of the things that it reminds me of baseball is about that there are bad guys and there are good guys. I wouldn't even say it's competition; it's drama. It's the evil empire. We don't even have to name them because we know who they are in baseball. Okay, we'll name them. The Yankees.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing that up, because they have been a thorn in my side as a fan for years on end. And there was a time when the Detroit Tigers of recent years went to the American League Championship and actually beat the Yankees. It was a great moment as a Tiger fan to see our Tigers go to the World Series after beating the Yankees. I mean, if you're going to beat a team to get to the World Series, that would be the way to do it. And yeah. Derek Jeter was still on that team at the time. So that tells you this was no slouchy team.
No. And it felt really good to beat Derek Jeter because he's one of the bad guys.
I'm telling you, it reminds me of the Red Wings. I'm talking hockey now. When they beat the Avalanche in the Stanley Cup. And it also reminds me of the Pistons beating the Lakers.
Oh boy, yeah.
So there you go. I mean, this is the equivalent in the baseball world.
Well, are the Tigers and the Yankees? Isn't it the Cleveland Indians?
Not so much. I think more so for Cleveland than it is for Detroit. I think our thorn has been consistently the Yanks. And just like you with the Great Bambino, and by the way, when I say the Great Bambino, we are talking about none other than, drum roll please, Babe Ruth, the Sultan of SWAT,
Yeah.
I can't even remember all the little things they say
Yeah.
in the Sandlot, but Babe Ruth was traded by the Red Sox to the Yankees. It was a curse that was bestowed on your team for, I don't even know how many years, until
86 years.
80 years, until finally
86, Eugene. 86.
86, excuse me.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave out those 6 because those were probably the longest, those
Yeah,
last
they were the
6.
worst. Yeah.
And but when you guys finally lifted the curse, you won how many championships?
4, just saying, 4 in the 2000s.
So, you know, as much as there was 86 years of suffering, you know, I got to believe that that sort of makes up for it.
Yeah, and I enjoy championing the Tigers because those guys were always, there were times when you were mean to us and you won, and that wasn't good. But there were more than enough times when we needed somebody to win, so that against the Yankees, so that the Yankees are up by 3 games. Okay, if the Yankees lost to Detroit, woohoo, we got an extra half a game on the Yankees. So
well, it's
yeah,
nice to talk about the Red Sox and the Yankees because they're 2 of the original teams that began the sport way back whenever it was conceived to have a national American league of baseball players. But speaking of that, there were some baseball players that were left out of that national American league, as we're talking about. And you have an illustrator.
Yeah,
you have an illustrator who helped to shed some light on some baseball players that were just as much a part of the building of the game that we so love today, that being the game of baseball.
Yeah, and I will share that screen. One thing I want to do too is I don't want to forget what's going on for you right now. Baseball is a really big part of your life with, the involvement of your 2 kids. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
All right, we can talk about that towards
so
the end.
We're gonna look at this guy right here, Kadir Nelson.
Wow.
Kadir, Kadir Nelson. So he's an illustrator, and he did this great book, I think like 10, 12 years ago, called We Are the Ship.
Beautiful.
And it's the story of the Negro Baseball League. And beautiful, beautiful book. Just his color and his sense of design. Really powerful.
I mean, first of all, these are exquisite illustrations, to say the least. But second of all, like in that very first illustration, which looks like a 2-page spread, if I may. When you see the way that the batter who's on deck, the one that's closest to the foreground, the light just sort of lifting over the top of the stadium and shining down just on the shoulders of that baseball player. That's so much the feeling of what you experience when you're at a baseball game, especially a game that's, in the afternoon, as opposed to the evening where you don't have big lights on yet. And I just enjoy so much the depiction, that beautiful shadow that's cast on the lower portion.
Yeah. And you really get his understanding of atmospheric perspective really gives a good sense of the space that he's in, the crowd in the background, the value and the vibrancy of the color has been brought way down, so that the color in the foreground the blue in the letters is a very vibrant blue as compared to, the tones in the background. Just it's so iconoclastic, this image of the guy standing in the batter's box swinging the bats back and forth.
Yeah.
And you're right, the way the light is, he's being hit by the light. It's getting to be late afternoon, we're late in the innings, the score's tied in the eighth inning. You really get the feeling for the game, and the experience of the game. One other thing too I want to say is it's interesting, to me, the anatomy of the figure in the foreground. Man, his left arm is way long, for the rest of his body, and his hands are really big too. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of Michelangelo, and that Michelangelo did a lot. Like if you look at David, it has a David quality to me, in sculpting, where David's hands are enormous, but Michelangelo did a lot of exaggeration in his sculpture. So even though the anatomy feels a bit off in terms of the length of the arm and the size of the hands and so forth, it doesn't sit badly. It feels, it just accentuates the heroic nature of this character in the foreground. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh, totally. When you think about famous baseball poems, there's probably none that's more famous than Casey at the Bat. When you think about a legendary image of a figure in any moment in time, and right now we're talking about baseball, I feel like that's what we're looking at. Number 20, who's getting ready to approach the plate, in terms of the way the artist did include enough exaggerations, with the anatomy, maybe slightly forced perspective, to increase our intrigue of the sheer magnitude and power that this individual is going to bring to his bat when that ball comes. You imagine that the skin of the ball is just going to be shed right off of the ball of string.
Yeah. I also like, what's interesting to me too is, can you see the cursor? I'm moving the cursor
Yeah.
around. Can you see that, Eugene? You see
Oh,
the
yeah.
way the light is actually a blue light on the cloth, and it's a warm shadow down there.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, the transformation. Then it's a warm light and a warm, and actually this is a cool shadow. So it flips, and that's what happens with this kind of, like it's also the reflection of the light from the sky on the cloth. So
Yeah.
just his handling, his understanding of the way light hits things, that's impressive to me.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to look at. It's very pleasing to look at. One of the things that catches my attention is not only the movement of the bat, the way that the artist indicates that with multiple bat images, but also, I've only tackled trying to draw something like this a couple times, not for a publication, but just on my own. And it's really difficult to create the feeling of such a vast space,
Yeah.
and to see those players that are on the field at the lowest point of our picture plane, and then where the artist's perspective is so close to that number 20, and giving us that feeling that we're looking from below up to this just gargantuan, muscular baseball player.
Yeah. And then the whole thing too of it being about the Negro Baseball League. It's that is a drama in and of itself, that you had all of these, like Satchel Paige, all of these fantastic talents that just didn't get the national venue, because of racism.
Yeah.
And that he celebrates it in this book, who they were. The book is just going back and forth about, telling us who these different characters are. So yeah, you should check it out. We Are the Ship.
Yeah,
Um,
it definitely helps people today, like yourself and myself, to sort of get a window into that time period. And there are some great films as well, like the film 42, which is of course about Jackie Robinson, who wore number 42, who is responsible for what we call breaking the color barrier in baseball. Unfortunately, in this country, um, since the inception of this country and the beginning of American history, we've had uh, just a tumultuous history and experience with racism existing, and it's been sort of squashed and sort of swept under the rug for so long. But in modern times, there are a lot of great voices like this illustrator who has been able to create the emotion and the connection for people like me to learn what truly this league was about, and how the history of baseball is always going to be tainted because it doesn't include the stats of these guys who
yep.
were greater than uh,
Yeah.
any
Giant.
imagination can bring forth as far as their abilities.
Yep. Yeah. Um, so yeah, to have this book celebrated, it's a good thing. It's a really great thing. One of the things too is, again, look look at the hands on this guy and this guy. They're now, yes, these are foreshortened. He's trying to impress us with who they are by making the hands really big. But like within the anatomy, uh, there is something about the great pitchers too. They do have big hands so that they can manipulate the baseball. So I don't know. I really find what I'm geeked about is that he is messing with the anatomy, which can look like, oh my God, the hands are too big, but they don't. They just look like uh, they accentuate the hero quality of these guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh,
So
definitely. And something else that catches my attention when you look at the two people next to each other, and I just look at the pants, the baseball pants, how the drapery is depicted so different from the one on the left as opposed to the one on the right.
yeah,
And I just enjoy so much the artist's understanding of how drapery works, and also bringing that forth so that there's such a nice variety uh, that we get to enjoy in this work.
yeah, and I'm thinking too, like, are these guys wearing flannel or cotton, or is this even wool in the middle of
Yeah,
July? Oh
you
my
know,
God.
you might be right. I think when you dig back deep into the history of baseball and its beginnings, I remember uh, he was like a grandpa to me. He was my godfather. His name was Cornell Zaromsky. And when we would go over to his house, his baseball glove was probably from the 1930s. It was so puffy and thick and hard to catch with, if you can imagine. And it didn't have a webbing to it, it just had the fingers, and it was much smaller than a typical glove, but much thicker than anything that I've ever seen since. And I don't even know what happened to that glove because he's no longer with us. But boy, I enjoyed as a kid having that memory.
Yeah, and to me too, like I asked you before we started, so what is the art part of talking about baseball? I mean, I knew that I had my personal experiences, and you reminded me that, yeah, that's the art part. You and me are the two artists who are talking about how baseball affected us. And so when I hear about that lumpy baseball glove and how it was hard to catch, it brings up experiences that can be, can help me to make artwork. It's visceral.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, for me too, like just looking at this picture, the thing about baseball too is that it is the hot sport. you play
Yeah.
baseball when it's hot, except in October when you're in the World Series.
Right.
Uh, but for the most part, and it's a long season, 162 games. I mean, come on, it's like a war, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Um, a different way than football is a war. Actually, all sports are like that, but 162 games. Wow.
Yeah, Mr. Faulkner, that is a very long season. Uh, I don't think any other sport uh, of the major sports have as long a season. And I think that's what is so endearing about baseball, if you say it's America's pastime, because it really lasts for quite a long period. And, spring training starts in, end of February, early March. Games begin in April. And like you said, you could be in October watching the World Series.
Yeah. So now, before we go, I want to hear about, do you want to talk about the X-Man and the art?
Yeah. So I have two kids, my son who's 16, Xavier, my daughter, Ruby, who's 10. And both of them are heavily entrenched in the world of baseball. Um, I would like to feel that maybe I had a little help with their interest and their love, but I really don't know uh, that how I really impacted that, other than to take them to some games as they were growing up. But I have to be honest, we didn't watch it a lot because we don't have cable, and so uh, unless you have cable, you can't really see the games. Um, and luckily, it was a sport that both of them, my son first, uh, expressed an interest. Oh, my friend is going to be on this t-ball team. Can I sign up? And my wife really was responsible for getting that going. Here I am, a dad, thinking about how fun it was when my son was born and we could play catch together. But here, my wife was the one that went and signed him up for his first baseball team. Where was I? What was I thinking? I wasn't part of that. So my wife always gives me credit about well, I was pounding the pavement trying to, make the mortgage payment probably. But she gives me credit, my wife does, that I took over the reins a little bit more when he was on a travel team, which is the next step after Parks and Rec. And when you're more serious and you get better, and then you shell out money for your kid to be on this team and travel around and play baseball. Why stay in one spot? Let's travel around. And and so anyway, after we were on this one team for 3 years, I thought it would be good for him to spread his wings. So I kind of took the reins at that point, and I haven't stopped, being involved. And my wife has been gracious to sort of allow me the opportunity to do that. But I have a new part of my baseball saga, and that is that I am now playing the role of coach. So there you go. I'm playing the role of coach. I have my coach's shirt. It says coach on it. So I have to believe that that is what I'm supposed to be doing. And why do I say that? Because look at our sponsor. And this is not the sponsor of our podcast. This is the sponsor of my daughter's team, Ruby, who refuses to play softball. She will only play hardball. She wants to be with the boys. And, how can I say no to that? I became coach, and this is my first time doing that. So look what I have with me. I have my Dunham's lineup card.
Woo.
I have this is my magnetic board with all the names of the players and the positions. We switch these around. This little chain, it hangs on the fence. And during the innings, the kids come and look and see when they are hitting, because that's the order, as well as what position they're going to play. And then, yes, we do have our scorebook, and you can see that games have been scored. There's pencil because we have to erase a lot. And so every game is scored, and there you go. And then you get 4 copies of this, so you can hand one over to, the umpire and the other team, so they know what your lineup is. So there you go. I'm a coach.
So in that scoreboard for the most recent game, I heard that Ruby had some real productivity. Can you
Yes.
show us in the scoreboard that?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't claim to know how to keep score. There's a lot of filling in of diamonds right here, I think, when you score some runs. But
Oh
my
yeah,
daughter, who's up top, you can see the runs that were scored, each shaded in diamond represents that. But in addition, she was able to get a home run, a triple, a single, and a walk, 4 for 4. She scored
woo.
some RBIs, and way to go, Ruby. What a great game.
Now, is she playing in a mixed league, boys and girls?
I know that they would allow more girls. It's just that when you think about hardball and the tradition, it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
include girls. So if we talk about the Negro leagues as being sort of left out of the history of baseball, think about the movie A League of Their Own with Madonna. Yes, the
Yep.
singer Madonna was in a movie, and I have to say, I think it's one of her best. It is all about a female hardball league that existed for real. And if you go to the Baseball Hall of Fame, there's a whole section about it. And unfortunately, it doesn't exist today. But my daughter, I think, wants to be responsible for bringing back women playing hardball.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
my son's high school, there's a female player on the freshman boys team, so that
Good.
fuels my daughter's fire, as well as my son just played a team from Wisconsin. We were in Grand Rapids in a tournament, and they had a female player as well. I told my daughter, and look, this is not going to end
Nope.
anytime soon.
That's good. That's good. That is awesome.
In fact, we stood in line at the Dairy Queen after the game. You got to do that, right?
Well, yeah.
And there were all these little league teams, and then there was a team of girls softball, and about her same age. And she stared, and I said, "Oh, look, there's girls over there in softball." She goes, she stopped for a minute. She just squinted her eyes, and she goes, "Oh, so that's what softball's like." And then she scratched her head, and she looked at me, and she goes, "I think they're a lot more wild than the boys on my team."
Hmm.
And then that's all she
Well,
said.
yeah, and I don't want to stand up against a softball pitcher either at trying to bat against that because that is
No.
fierce. Yeah.
Oh, anyone that thinks that that would be a fun or easy thing to do, you got
No.
another thing coming.
Well, thank you for sharing with us about X-Man and Ruby.
You're
I will say,
absolutely welcome.
yeah, I got this hat in driving home from Boston in the summer of 2004, because the Red Sox were starting to do better then, and they hadn't won anything in 86 years. But when they finally won the World Series that year, I took it to an embroider and I said, and they were calling the Red Sox the idiots because I don't know if you recall, they all had long hair at the time and they looked ridiculous. Like they called them the cavemen too. And so I had this person embroider on the back, idiots triumphant. But when I got the hat back, it has an apostrophe in between the T and the S. So it was supposed to be, the idiots are triumphant, but I don't know. So yeah.
I love the fact that there's an apostrophe that where it's not supposed to be. I also
Yeah,
love the fact that
that
you
was
put that on there. And I also love the fact that the year that they actually won after 86 years was the year that you in purchasing your hat sort
I
of
know.
opened the window for them to walk through and become
Yeah.
champions.
And that's the thing about baseball is that it has these I don't know, it's certainly you can have the feelings of tremendous elation and big drops in all of the sports, whatever you're talking about, football, curling, uh, you know, uh,
Badminton.
badminton. You can have all of that, but again, I think it is the structure of baseball with the innings and so forth that the Red Sox were supposed to go down that year, and they certainly pushed the edges of the envelope in the series against the Yankees, where they were down 3-0. And at that time, I was like, I'm not watching anymore. I'm not watching this. I give up on the Red Sox. And a friend of my son's who was in middle school at the time was like, Matt, just watch one more game. Let's just watch this game. And they started to come back. So
Okay, the
yeah.
hat and the fact that you watched that one more game, I'm telling you,
It's why they won. It's
not just why they won. It's why they've won 3 additional times since then. Can I just tell you that in 2006, okay, so in 1984, the Tigers won the World Series when I was a youngster.
Kurt Gibson.
All I heard about was their 1968 World Championship that happened when I was just 3 years old. So I didn't remember that, but I remember the 84. I lived through it. I, was just so ecstatic. And when they made it back in 2006, they did not win one game in that World Series. And when they made it back in 2011, they did not win one game. So let me just tell you, winning 4 times in recent years is tremendous.
Well, thank you, sir. And I do take responsibility for a lot of that. But did you watch the game with Kurt Gibson when he hit that home run?
Oh my gosh, that's forever embedded into my memory. I didn't just watch that. When Kirk Gibson got traded to the Dodgers, and then they made it to the World Series a couple of years later, and then he did the exact same thing. I mean, both of those moments will forever be solidified in my brain. And I'm not a big Dodgers fan. Don't get me wrong. I just felt for my former player, Kirk Gibson, because he started out with the Tigers. He's from Michigan. He played on Michigan State's football team as a college ball player. I mean, you kind of grow up with these guys, and they, like Verlander, I'll always be a fan because even though he's with the Astros, he meant so much to our team, making it in those years to the World Series.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kirk Gibson.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that's sort of larger than life in my brain.
Yep.
There's a little bit of a folklore that follows these guys.
Yeah. They become these iconic, heroic, mythological characters. The guy for the Red Sox, Big Pappy Ortiz, hitting those home runs when they were always needed.
One of the guys that was on the 68 Tigers World Series team that I remember, he was still playing when I was a child, but I can remember him playing, and it was Willie Horton, and they have a statue of him at Comerica Park currently. But I do remember listening to the radio under my pillow, AM radio, to hear the Tigers. And every night religiously, I would listen. You could hear the sound of I felt, because I lived in Detroit, I felt like, I was close enough where if I just put my ear out the window, maybe I could hear the crowd, several miles away. And the radio helped me to feel that. And then, of course, the moment of Willie Horton so often was he just hit the ball out over the stadium into the street. And he was one of those kind of guys. And I can't tell you how many times that occurred. And in my mind, I had only been to the stadium once or twice, but I could see it. Like I could visually see that ball just go right over. And I felt like I could picture every single person's face and his face and the people in the street that were catching it. And, just a very cool moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you for suggesting this subject.
You got it.
I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about this. And it is fuel for the flame of my creativity. Baseball always has been. Yeah. So.
It's the pulse of who you are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we need to do a little singing,
Yeah, yeah.
and we can't think of a better song than "Take Me Out
Take
to
out
the
to the
Ball
ball
Game."
game.
Take
Take
me out
me
to
out
the
to the
park.
park. Buy me
Buy
some
me some peanuts and cracker
and Cracker
Jack.
Jacks. I don't
I don't
care if
care if
you
I
never
ever get back, so just root,
visit.
root
Root,
for
root
the
for the whole
Tigers.
team.
You have to say
If
Red
they,
Sox.
oh, the Red Sox, sorry, yeah. If they don't
They
win,
don't
it's
win,
a
it's a
shame.
shame. Oh, just
'Cause
one,
it's 1,
two,
2, 3
three
strikes,
strikes,
you're out
you're out at the
at the
old
old ball game. That was for you,
yay.
Eugene.
On behalf of myself, Eugene Clark, that's Mr. Matt Faulkner. We'll see you again. Thanks for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Hit one out of the park for me.